Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Places We'll Go show. Now, actually, I've really got to say that I've been looking forward to this episode for a really, really long time. And we have the wonderful Kate Mackie, who's the Global Marketing Director at EY. Welcome, Kate.
Thanks, Richie. Thanks, guys.
Absolute pleasure. Now, look, Kate has had an incredible journey, and I'm really pleased and delighted to say that Kate has just made partner at E&Y. Hey. Amazing news and really no mean feat. And I'm sure we're going to dig into some of that journey as well. But Kate has an incredible job. She runs a team of around 150 people, about 15 directors all around the world. She's actually charged with all aspects of marketing at E&Y, from brand strategy right through to revenue management. Prior to E&Y, she's had a fabulous career as well, with organizations like GE, Carlson Marketing, and even started a career agency side at Ogilvy. It's quite interesting how you navigate from Ogilvy all the way to E&Y. There we are. We were just saying before that Kate is actually an alumni of the Institute for Real Growth, which both myself and Mark have and are currently going through. So it's a real pleasure that we get to welcome Kate to the show today. And I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your journey, Kate.
So, Kate, welcome. Fabulous to have you on the show. And congratulations again to make partner. I know that in your world, that's a massive milestone. So many congratulations. I mean, maybe let's just start there. So tell us a bit about how you're feeling about that major accolade and milestone.
Well, it's fantastic. I mean, we've got 2.5 partners in the brand marketing communications function at EY, and I'm the 3.5. So I add an extra one in there. And our brand leader, John Radesky, is one. Karen Hopkins, who's our CMO, and then our chief of staff for the CEO, who also runs communications, and so she kind of has a double hat. So I'm the third. So I'm the first kind of pure marketing or integrated go-to-market, which is my pillar. We have different pillars in brand marketing and communications, and I look after that. And personally, I can't quite believe it, if I'm honest, because it's one of those things that people talk about, and particularly in our world, in professional services, it is one of those things that's kind of seen as the pinnacle. But I had a really good conversation with one of my new partner peers last night, who was saying, don't worry, you've just opened another door and there's a huge ladder above you. You thought you got to the top, you're not. You can see the next level, because you do then have another kind of few retinue. There's rungs on the ladder to climb to get even higher within the partnership. So it's a fantastic accolade, and it's credit to the team as a whole, because I do think it gives us a great inspiration that you can work hard in marketing, and it's got a seat at the table now, which is fantastic.
Isn't that quite incredible, actually? Particularly your last point around it being, almost a team aspiration thing, that marketing is rightfully getting its seat at the top table there. I mean, in your experience, has that always been the case in professional services? How's marketing been perceived across the landscape in professional services?
I think professional services is a difficult one, because it's person-to-person marketing. So you end up with that relationship-driven marketing. So it's very much about that last conversation. In terms of last mile attribution, it's last conversation rather than last click.
Right.
And that last conversation is generally with the account team. And so kind of the understanding of how marketing can add to that and what weight we can give to that conversation has taken a while, and technology to really kind of show how we can have those deeper kind of meaning from a marketing perspective to really enable a conversation to get to the right place.
Yeah. So Kate, you talk about further rungs on the ladder. So you're still ambitious. Love that. But let's go all the way back and join some dots on you. As Richie said, started agency side. So where did it all begin? What's the journey?
So I left university. In fact, the most hilarious thing I saw the other day was a cine film, or a really rubbish video, I can't quite remember how old I am, of me and some friends talking about what we wanted to do when we grew up. And I think it must have been 16 or 17, I think I'd said I wanted to be marketing director of ICI, which is a very specific and quite obscure...
ICI, the paint company?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not quite sure why. But I think, obviously they're fantastic. I don't know a lot about anymore. But I've been doing chemistry, biology, and maths A-levels. So I was kind of scientifically minded, went that way, and started off my degree in chemistry. So I did triple honours at Leeds, which was chemistry, management, and philosophy, history and philosophy of science, kind of the major area. And as is the kind of one at those times, a BSc was about 36 hours a week. And if I dropped the labs, it went to 6 hours a week. And so I was very much driven by a little bit less time and a bit more envy of my BA chums who were all kind of, spending most of their days having a lot more fun than I was. I was in a lab coat glasses and kind of really getting stuck into the chemistry side of things. And I hugely enjoyed chemistry, but the first year of chemistry degrees are about physics, and I'd never really done a lot of physics. So I didn't find it as easy as I probably should have done. So coming out of university, I'd come out with a BA rather than a BSc that I'd gone in trying to kind of think about. So this ICI thing in my head was off the table. I started just wondering what I wanted to do. I wasn't really sure. I knew marketing was somewhere I wanted to get to, and I also knew I wanted to travel before I kind of got into the career properly. So I went back to Bristol when my mum and dad had moved to. I'm originally from the Northwest, I'm originally from Southport, and my parents had moved down to Bristol. So I went down there and just started applying for any jobs. And at the time, there was a massive kind of section in The Guardian that was all about marketing jobs. And I think I applied for, CMO of this, head of that, kind of thinking, what? Of course I can do that. And realised quickly that I wasn't even getting a rejection letter, and I was being absolutely ridiculous. So I ended up being kind of, I suppose it was a runner at an agency in Bristol where I first started. And that was my first kind of introduction to work proper. I mean, I've had jobs along the way, but that was proper work for the first time. And I really got under the skin of doing, a lot of newspaper marketing for people like Land Rover Link and kind of small regional businesses, and really thinking of and working closely with those business leaders. So the owners of those small businesses were people that I'd be sat there in the room, kind of taking notes, trying to understand the why of their objectives and what they were up to, as the most junior person in the room, but still kind of getting great exposure because it was such a small agency that I worked. So that was my first kind of role. And then after about a year of that, I went traveling. I went off to Australia and came back with lots of stories, a bit of a better town, and my now husband. So I met him in Sydney. Turns out he was from Swindon. He'd just been there a while and picked up the accent. So he wasn't going to give me a green card at all. And we came back together, and we've been married kind of 22 years now. But the role that I then kind of went into, I started thinking along the way, I've met lots of people who worked in advertising agencies, kind of worked in marketing, had talked about the journey they've had in London and the fun they were having. And so that's where I decided I'm going to move to London. This is going to be where I start my career proper. I've had the fun. I've had the kind of step in the door. I've gone to Australia. I've had a lot of fun over there. And now it's time to kind of knuckle down and get a proper job. So I went through EMR search and they sent me off. I booked, because I was in Bristol still, so they booked a week of interviews. They booked kind of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, full of interviews as a account exec to start in an agency, because I decided this is what I wanted. And the first one I went to was Bates Dorland, and I was interviewed by an incredible guy called Graham Robertson, who is still a friend and mentor of mine now. And he interviewed me. It was a very fun, short interview. And he went, well, can you just come with me now? And would you mind just sitting in this room? You're employed by us, so we will be on Wednesday. Pick up your pen and paper, sit there. We need somebody to take notes in this meeting. And it was a pitch for a new account. So that was the rest of the day, and I kind of cancelled the rest of the meetings and rest of the calls. And then I was asked to start work on the Wednesday. So I went home, packed my stuff, came down, and kind of moved into advertising then. So Bates Dorland, it was their 99th year when I started. They didn't make 100. They were bought by Ogilvy at that point, or bought by WPP. And the part that I worked in, Bates 141, became 141 Worldwide, which then became part of kind of more of the Ogilvy group. And then I moved into, to work more in the HSBC kind of financial services space within the Ogilvy group. So Team HSBC was where I kind of really cut my teeth, alongside having a role looking after NCDL, which was National Canine Defence League, and then became Dogs Trust. And we worked on that rebrand and worked all the way through that. So I did about 5-6 years in the agency in 141, but at the same time, I ended up with about 4 business cards, because we had a number of different businesses that big, so One for One Worldwide, Ogilvy Action at one point, I think, Mather at one point, and all sitting at the same desk and kind of working across a number of different financial services clients. So, investment banks, retail banks, private banks, and also always keeping kind of NCDL and Dogs Trust throughout my career, and adding in a bit more kind of FMCG and the like along the way. So just working on a ton of stuff, but really useful career time. And I went from account exec to account director under kind of Graham, under his tutelage, and then moved on from Ogilvy and moved down to Bristol, because at that point my husband, then my other half decided he'd finished his degree, he'd gone to Leeds again, but 10 years after me, and done a degree in education. So he'd gone back to university and done a degree in education, and we were trying to work out where we would live together. He didn't want to live in London, and my parents are in Bristol, so we kind of just went that way and thought, well, yeah, it looks like a cool place, let's go down there and see what that's like. And then my time in Bristol, I worked through a number of different agencies, so really looking across my CV and trying to plug the gaps of the things that I didn't know. So I'd always worked in kind of integrated marketing, with a lot more above the line, and actually the area of expanse, or kind of the whole in my CV was very much digital and data. So I started looking more into that digital and data space and moved through a number of different agencies in Bristol, spending a couple of years each. And then ended up being headhunted from one of those to GE Capital, where I was headhunted to set up their retail savings bank, which was kind of an alternative funding source for GE Capital. We applied for a banking license, and we were so close. Metro Bank beat us by a week. We were aiming to be the first in 100 years, and we were the second in 100 years by a week. So we launched that bank. It won a load of awards, and then GE changed their strategy, and so we sold that bank. So we set up and sold the bank all kind of within 4 years. It was an award-winning savings bank. It's really exciting. And then from there, I was headhunted by EY, and I started at EY in global tax. So I was the global tax BMC leader, and started there. And that was exciting because whilst it doesn't sound like the most, in the necessary move that people would choose to make, it was something that at GE we'd always been very much aware of our tax position. So it was something that was quite integral to the running of GE Capital, and actually taking that forwards. It was good to dig into that. It's also a really technology-driven area of the business. There's a whole host of tech that kind of exists within that space. We've been AI has been built in for years, RPA, machine learning, all that sort of stuff's all part of what we do. It's huge, and it's really interesting in terms of how you deal with different tax, regulatory, kind of geographic differences, and how you build that into what you're doing. I could go on for days. It's very exciting in my world. And then from there, I was asked to look after the marketing transformation of, or be involved in we had a digital fast forward project. And that digital fast forward project included working across the business units or business lines to work out what MarTech should be doing and what should be our future. And I ended up working very closely with that one. And it started to, it meant that my role was built. So the integrated go-to-market function became kind of the future role after that. And I applied and got that role. And that's kind of where I am now. And over the years, it's just kind of absorbed different teams along the way. And we've become a much bigger function. And then I made partner, or it was announced a couple of weeks ago, but it only actually takes effect from the 1st of July. So I've still got a bit of time where I don't have the responsibility and the pressure just yet.
But all the accolade. So there you go. All the glory. Hey.
That's a very kind of long-winded potted history.
Hey, it's amazing. What a wonderful career journey that you've had. And actually there's so much to pick up on. I mean, first of all, when you talk about your degree, there's an irony here, or there's a similarity here. Because when I started my degree, I actually ended up changing 5 times. But progressively, and luckily didn't lose time because of it, but I started doing law and social anthropology. And then I ended up doing business studies, graduating with business studies in a very similar way that you felt sort of you were losing out on social time. I did the same. So it's sort of getting slightly easier. Not that business studies is easy, but certainly the progression in my mind was that. So, that's interesting. And of course, I mean, you talk about tax and being an interesting area. Mark would argue that insurance is the most interesting area. So, there we go.
We'll have to.
I'm obviously in great company here. But look, I mean, what I really take away from that, and of course, you've made strategic career moves, and of course, you even talked about some of the skill gaps that you needed to fill across to have a holistic skill set and capabilities to do what you're doing today. But overriding that, there was something perhaps subtle, something that you've actively thought of, is that your personal life and your life together as a family has almost equally dictated where your career trajectory has gone and where you've lived and what you've done. And I kind of feel there's maybe a dual part to play, one, yes, professional hat, but very much a personal hat on as well. And I wonder, just through that process, have you reflected on, that aspect, that personal element guiding your somewhat career choices as well?
I think I've been very lucky in that my husband's a teacher. So he's gone back and trained as a teacher, which means that he's always been incredibly supportive of everything that I'm doing, knowing that, actually I pay more of the mortgage than he does to an extent. And so it's always been a conversation where he's totally supportive. He's just, in fact, at one point when we first had my second child, so we've got 2 kids, when we had the second, we talked about what to do next. Did we get a nanny in? Who goes back to work? How does that all work? And my husband took 5 years off in the end because, unfortunately, his kind of teacher salary wouldn't really give him anything after paying for any nannies or kind of childcare that would look after the 2 of them. And rather than kind of sucking that up and getting on with it, he was like, "No, I'm not paying somebody my entire salary to look after 2 kids when I'm looking after 32 other people's kids. It just doesn't make sense. Actually, let's just think about this differently." And so we sat down and we kind of worked out salaries and we worked out this, that, and the other. We worked out, okay, well, what do I need to earn to cover his part of it plus the tax? Because obviously that makes differences. And then from there it was I started thinking about what will I do next and how do I make that move into something that's slightly different and a bit more strategic. It's only really at that point that a proper strategy or a proper kind of career move was made. And that's why I was open to the conversation around, I was at GE at the time, and it was a conversation around EY. When they came knocking, it was just a really opportune time for us to have that conversation and kind of move forward. And so I actually think a lot of it is serendipitous. It's all about being open to opportunities, and the squaddiness of the whole thing is something to be expected and embraced, because I think it's the only way you fill the gaps in your CV you don't even know are there. And you get the opportunities to work in different cultures, different teams, and work out what works for you. I think coming out of university, or even selecting your degree, as we've both shown, it's really difficult to come out with something you actually started with. And I think the expectation that you make a decision and stick with it it's just not there, and it's just not something that you should have in your head. It's just, let's test and learn, let's try. In the same way that we do with marketing campaigns, that should be how we think about our careers. It's testing and learning and thinking and finding the right thing for you. Yeah. Because you don't know what it'll be. I'm sure, or maybe Mark decided insurance was the thing he wanted from day one. Maybe it was, his ICI loan. But ultimately, I do think you end up somewhere and you get, I like solving problems and I like tricky stuff. And I talk about with the team, like, unravel the spaghetti. So don't just get satisfied with the first answer. If you're looking at why somebody does something, don't just ask why and walk away. Ask why until you get to a point you feel like you've got to the end of the spaghetti. Because otherwise, that kind of base kind of behavioral science isn't going to be the real reason or the underlying objective behind somebody's ask. And I think in an advertising agency or an agency, integrated agency of any sort, marketing agency, digital agency, you always need to look at the why. So when I think about kind of the people that have influenced me along the way, my husband, to your kind of earlier question, going round in circles to get back to that, has played a massive part, but also people along the way have as well. So, one of the things that I think is hugely important is finding the right mentors and finding the right kind of peer group around you who will support you on all of those journeys. And my husband is definitely one of those. He's incredibly supportive, which I'm very grateful for. And, conversely, he's going back to uni in September to do a master's in educational psychology. So it's a give and take, and it's who gets to do the fun stuff for a while, because he's been working at TA for a while.
Are you doing the fun stuff, or is he doing the fun stuff right now?
What I'm doing is the fun stuff, but he thinks what he's doing is the fun stuff. So, but maybe that's the beauty of it. We both think we're doing the fun stuff.
Wonderful.
You're both right, and of course, now insurance. Hey, I mean, it gets a bum rap, but see, I didn't as a boy dream of growing up and working insurance, and I'm out of it now. No, I started at Mars, but that was an accident in itself. Anyway, another story for another day. Now you immediately credited your team when you talked about the success of yourself getting towards partner. So I'm interested about what's your perspective on leading big teams. What's the good and the bad? Because it's not always perfect, but what's your perspective on that?
I think it's a huge opportunity to learn from lots of people, which has both positives and deltas. And I think the positives are that you absolutely cross cultures, you cross geography, so you're constantly learning about why people do stuff. And that's always something that I'm very interested in, is what are the kind of individual motivations of your team members, so that you can make sure you've got the right people in the right place. And I always talk to my boss about, she plays chess with us. You can see that she's kind of putting us in the right place for our best skills. And it's always a bit like that. It feels, I think, as a leader of a large team, that you're trying to make sure that you're optimizing the role that each individual plays. So it's a bit like a football or soccer coach, as you might talk about. You're finding who are your strikers, who do you put in the right role, who's got a different skill set, who's your goalkeeper. Do we need people on and off the pitch, like kind of supporting? And I think for me, thinking about a team is absolutely enabling people to be as good as they can be. So it's understanding them, understanding what their motivations are, and really helping them be their best. The downside is that takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of personal time, and it takes a lot of coaching. It also takes a lot of kind of development time with those individuals to make sure that they do know what they need to be doing. And not everybody takes feedback well. And it's always, you've got to think about how you have those conversations around development rather than around this is a bad negative thing. It's about, this is positioning you to be your best and opening those opportunities up so that they can see that you're there to catch them at any kind of point that they're getting the opportunity to really try. And it doesn't matter if it goes a little bit squiggly or wiggly along the way, because you'll help.
You may not watch it, but I'm just coming to the end of Ted Lasso.
Yeah.
And and I'm just at the total football bit about, and you said chess or, anyway, great to get that perspective. Maybe just one follow-up question on the, how do you deal with those difficult development feedback conversations? Because it's something that many people listening are yet to have it, or about to have their first, or at the beginning of finding their craft of those types of conversations.
I spent, I'm trying to think, 6 or 7 years at GE. It might even be less, might be 5 or 6 at GE. And one of the things GE Capital, which is obviously part of the big GE, and their training programs are absolutely awesome. So, they have Crotonville University type programs, a little bit kind of Kellogg University, but similar. And their training programs are absolutely awesome. And one of the things they do is they absolutely turn you into a GE person. So you learn kind of the ropes and you get the training, and it's kind of embedded into you. And I left GE thinking, gosh, thank goodness I've left all that process behind. And now I'm implementing it all, but never mind. So people find that quite funny, because I was the most kind of unprocessed GE person, but I'm very processed outside of it. But in terms of feedback, one of their courses was all about how feedback is a gift. And it's absolutely, feedback is about the perception that you bring to a relationship. So whether that's, how you delivering something, your relationship with somebody, and it's about the veneer of you. It's not about the you inside. So it's not something that is being given to you to change who you are, but it's being given to you to change how you are perceived. So it's about how your behavior is impacting somebody else. And so really it's, and at EY we use SBIBI, which is situation, behavior, impact. And then what could you do differently to change that behavior and therefore change the impact? And I lead kind of coaching excellence programs and the like along the way. But it's a really good thing to think about, that this isn't about, you, Kate Mackie, as kind of the individual inside. It's not somebody coming along and really casting who you are. It's about how you're being perceived, and it's about the impact of that perception, which we're often not that self-aware of, particularly in the early days. You don't necessarily know how you're coming across or how you're being perceived. So it's a really valuable thing to get that feedback, good or bad, so that you can make sure that what you're doing is being perceived in the right way, and that you are, optimizing as much as you can along the way to really enable relationship to be as good as they can be.
Absolutely spot on. I mean, obviously, naughty scenarios, but like you say, self-perception, I think, certainly as I go through my career, is absolutely critical at every level. And in today's world, quite tricky, I mean, we're sitting across screens these days and we're not seeing people, and people are living in different cultures and contexts all the time and having to deal with that. And I wondered, do you think that's evolving? Do you think the need and how you manage that situation is evolving in a new world that we're finding ourselves in?
Yes, I absolutely do. I think we need to think about what happens when you turn off the camera, because, if you are going to deliver bad news, you need to make sure the individual's got support around them. And you won't necessarily sit, they're not in the office, you can't see them, you can't put that kind of talent or HR support around an individual if you're having to have a really difficult conversation. So I think, there are times I've had to have those difficult conversations through the camera, and it's making sure that there's somebody who is going to follow up quickly, be there physically if we need them to be, in terms of, who's geographically close to that individual. And just making sure that you think about that person in the round. It's not just about getting the, I've got to deliver this bad news, it's on my to-do list. It's not just throwing it in and kind of ticking it off. It's making sure that person's going to be okay afterwards, and really having that conversation, but doing it on their terms as well. So some people, for instance, I've had to, over the course of my career, I've had to obviously have difficult conversations and different calls, and people don't always want to be on camera, so don't make them. And it's about being empathetic and working with those individuals. If you do have to have difficult conversations, to make sure that they're in the kind of best place for them to be able to absorb that, take that, and then act on it later. But also knowing that they might need some additional help and support along the way. And then the other side, in terms of how do you celebrate across kind of camera, is really quite hard as well. So, you can kind of all put your balloons and backgrounds on, but it's not quite the same as having, kind of cheersing with your Coke or your coffee or your champagne in the office.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah.
But, it's difficult to have that celebratory moment on the camera as much as it is the other way.
Yeah. I'm going to rewind to the very beginning when you said you have amazing milestone to get to partner in a professional services firm at a global level, but it opens the door to another bunch of rungs on a ladder. It reminded me of the Nelson Mandela quote that there's always a bigger mountain.
Uh-huh.
So I'd love to hear how you think about ambition. What does ambition mean to you for the future?
You see, I don't think I'm ambitious in terms of, I want to hit X milestone. It wasn't joining EY, being partner was never something that was kind of on the list. It wasn't, I'm ready to join EY and get partner. It wasn't kind of I've got a 5-year plan type thing at all, because I've never really had one of those. For me, what I've done is follow what's interesting, and I'm really competitive with myself. So I'm absolutely appalling at sport, but I love it. And my kids find it hilarious because I continue to try, because actually, sailing, skiing, I'm better at them. I'm never going to be brilliant, but I always want to kind of do better than I did last time. And it's the same with running. I'm absolutely a plodder, but I always want to get a better PB. And it's that same sort of thing. I think throughout my career, it's just been, well, how can I do better? What can I do differently? And much more kind of self-fulfilled rather than being particularly ambitious about a role or a rank. And that to me is also kind of getting to the solution for that role. So my dad always says, be really careful that you might have a savior complex, because you like to, get stuck in, fix stuff, and then what's the next thing to fix? To tell him that that's not a savior complex, that's just being a leader. Never mind. And So all of that kind of fixing along the way is something that I like to do. I like to kind of make sure that things are working as best they can, and then can continually focus on something new. It's also probably because I get bored fairly easily. So I've always been in roles where there is new stuff being given to me or new asks being given to me on a fairly regular basis, and kind of being assumed into the role that I'm doing rather than being kind of adjuncts. It's kind of, okay, well, I'll just keep bringing these pieces in and keep seeing how it goes. And so over time, jobs have grown and roles have grown, and it ends up hitting milestones that you didn't necessarily have in the first place. But then you get there and it's, okay, well, that's fantastic. I've managed to do that. It wasn't easy, but we've got here. And it is, okay, there's always another mountain. What's the next thing to climb? What's the next thing to kind of fix or look at? So it's less about ambition and more about staying interested, keeping my mind focused on things, and also making sure that I'm kind of moving forwards as well, rather than moving backwards. Or then sideways is fine as well. If you've got holes in your CV, that was always something that I've said to various people, is look at your CV. If you're going to try and find another job, you want to look at a different role, look at what you've achieved so far and look at the things that other people might ask you to do, and where you've got those gaps, try and get experience in them, even in current role, or by kind of leaning in and working with teams outside of your current role.
You piqued my interest on two levels, on two different areas with that answer there. The first was which I'm gonna park. I'm gonna say the question and park it, which was the difference between how you find competitiveness and ambition and what you find is the differences. But as you spoke a bit more and you talked about your dad around savior syndrome.
Maybe complex.
Complex. There we are. I had to pick up on that one. Because I think in today's context, right, certainly a corporate career, and as we're getting through, this whole notion of adding value, right, is almost sunk into people as they move through. And constantly people searching for how we define purpose and what is our purpose, and align it to different places and spaces and organizations. And it almost feels like to me that could be a classic example of searching for trying to be a savior in a context, when the reality is, and I often say this to myself, nobody wants to be saved per se. And I just wonder, how do you reconcile the two? Maybe purpose versus being a savior.
I did actually tell my dad I think it was wrong. So it's more purpose, I think, than savior. Because I've always been in transformative roles. So I've always been brought into roles that are in the throes of transformation, or brought into a role to transform something. So the conversation we had, it was one of those side by side, walking with your dad type thing, having a conversation. Where you always have those tricky, or not tricky conversations, but more interesting ones. And the whole kind of notion of savior complexes, you don't always have to step in and fix everything and then take the credit, and it's kind of be seen as the savior. And I think that's absolutely something that I would shy away from. It's not something I'm comfortable with, taking credit, being in the spotlight, all that sort of stuff. It's not my first choice. But I do think transformation is hugely important, not only for driving value, as you say, but also enabling people to get to where they need to get to, and really helping teams get the best out of themselves. And high performance teaming is absolutely part of that kind of transformative mindset. And how do you really drive that forward so that you are unlocking value for the individual and also for the organizations?
Just want to say very quickly, I think that answer there was just amazing, and it's been really that answer there is really helpful to me, and that perspective between the balance of the two and how that's carved out, and what to watch out for and what to look out for in a positive way. So thank you for that.
I'm the dad.
So Kate, the time has whizzed by, and it's come to the final question. You've given so many pearls of advice so far, but perhaps if we think about the next generation coming through and all the challenges that they face, what would be the main piece of advice you would give for them to think about?
I would say to keep that in mind. Don't jump into a no. Always try and jump into a yes. So try and accept opportunities. They might not be what you think that they are, and just embrace the squiggliness because the serendipitous journey will get you to places you never even knew you thought you would go.
The places will go.
I mean, you couldn't make it. We didn't pay Kate to to end on that note. But yes, it is all about the squiggliness. And I'm actually just going to take a moment to shout out again to Helen Tupper and Sarah Ellis for all the amazing things that they're doing in normalizing squiggliness through Amazing If. But Kate, that's a great way to end. What a journey we've been on. So I'll do my best to just try and pull out some of the key things that you've talked through in the last 35 minutes or so. So again, congratulations, partner. 'Tis but a moment in time when there's more rungs of the ladder to climb, but what a great achievement. But then in a flash, so humble about, well, kind of it's credit to my team as much as anything. So that was a lovely start. You always knew you wanted to get into marketing, which we see a mixed bag actually. Some people it never occurred to them, they fell into it, whereas you were a bit more directive to the extent that you knew you wanted to be ICI marketing director at 16. I've never had anything like it. Amazing. But nonetheless, started as a runner in an agency in Bristol and worked your way up. And I think that's a key theme that you've jumped to say yes many times. And that's an interesting journey that it's taken you on. You also talked about the interplay with you and your husband's career, and being open to opportunity, exploring what's right for you. And then you use this lovely phrase as unraveling the spaghetti of a career, which is a great metaphor. Another flip on squiggliness maybe, but you also quoted your husband as one of your mentors and peer groups, which again is an unusual but very positive thing to say. Leading teams is like chess. It's great, it's interesting, but it also takes time and energy. And then I loved your frame on difficult conversations, not trying to change somebody, but how their behavior impacts others. So it's almost not about you in a sense. I like that reframe. And then we heard about how you're not ambitious. Well, at least I think ambitious in the right way and very ambitious in yourself. And I've got this picture of you, I don't know, trying sports and your kids laughing at you, but you're determined to dog it and keep going. And your dad was wrong. You know, if you needed any sort of support, wing people on that one. I think that savior complex is very much part and parcel of leading big teams. You are there to help and fix things, and manage the chess pieces. And then we heard about jumping into a yes again, embracing the squiggliness. So in a nutshell is, I think a few things have come out. For me, you strike a great balance of empathy and ambition. So not headless or reckless ambition, but empathy in the right way, looking after yourself and others along the way. I also get a sense that you've really embraced that careers require work. They're not flash in the pan type things. They require crafting. What are the gaps in your CV? It's always a work in progress. There's always more rungs on the ladder. So that ethic of work and ethic of better. And that's probably the final point, that ethic of there's always better available. And hard work makes the day. So great session, Kate. Thank you. Loads of things for people to pick up on and think about. And really big thanks from Richie and I for your time today.
Thank you.